Hey everyone, ready to dive into a topic that's sure to show up on your UPSC exams.
I think this one's a pretty safe bet.
We're talking about the rise of digital tech in rural education and what it all means for India's future.
Huge implications for social development, policies, you name it.
Exactly. And we're basing our deep dive on a recent article from The Hindu. So if you haven't read it yet, now's a good time to grab a copy.
Yeah, definitely check that out.
Okay, so before we get into the pandemic and all the changes that brought about,
Big changes.
yeah, what was the scene like before? Digital education in rural India, was it even a thing?
Well, it was definitely limited. Think about it, not enough devices, unreliable internet, and digital literacy just wasn't where it needed to be.
Yeah, you're right. So then COVID hits, everyone's scrambling to adapt, schools are shut down. What happens in rural areas? Does the whole digital education thing just fall apart?
You know what? It actually did the opposite. The pandemic, in a weird way, sped things up, forced everyone to figure out digital tools, even in rural areas.
Mhm.
Yeah, and we have the data to prove it. Acer data shows that smartphone ownership in rural India jumped from 36% in 2018 to a whopping 84% by 2024.
Wow, 84%. That's incredible.
It is, right.
So, okay, more smartphones, obviously that's a big deal. But what does it actually mean for education? Does it automatically translate to better learning?
That's the question, isn't it? I mean, think about what suddenly becomes possible. Access to educational content, online courses, different kinds of training. All of that opens up for students who might not have had those opportunities before.
Okay, yeah, I see the potential there. But even with more smartphones around, I'm guessing there were still some major roadblocks.
Oh, absolutely. Roadblocks everywhere. One of the biggest. Many families share a single smartphone, so less individual learning time for each kid, right?
Makes sense.
And then there's the internet situation. Expensive data plans, spotty coverage, slow speeds. That's a reality in a lot of rural
Right,
areas.
and on top of that, we have to think about digital literacy,
Yeah.
right? It doesn't matter how many devices you have if people aren't comfortable using them.
Exactly. And it's not just the students, parents, and even teachers need to be digitally literate. You know, the ASR data actually shows that a lot of mothers in rural India haven't had much formal education
Oh,
themselves.
wow.
So if parents aren't digitally savvy, it's tough for them to support their kids with all this new technology. It becomes a cycle.
That's really insightful. It sounds like, honestly, a lot of potential for frustration.
Hmm.
But I'm curious about all the talk about AI solving these problems.
Yeah.
Is that just hype, or can it actually make a difference in rural education?
I think AI has huge potential. Imagine personalized learning paths for each student, real-time feedback, tools that can translate content into different languages, even recognize different languages. I mean, that's transformative.
Yeah, especially in a country as diverse as India.
Right.
Okay, so that's starting to sound promising, but how do we actually make this happen? I remember the Hindu article mentioned a few solutions.
Yeah, they had some interesting ideas. One that stood out to me was setting up these digital learning hubs in rural communities.
Oh, learning hubs. Okay.
Equip them with smart devices, and they basically become knowledge centers, a way to provide structured learning support that works alongside what's happening in the classroom.
And what about all those broadcast learning initiatives that popped up in Maharashtra during the pandemic? Remember reading about that? Could something like that be scaled up across the whole country?
It's definitely possible. Involving the community, figuring out what's already working and how to make it bigger, that's key.
Uh,
And obviously, government investment and policy support are crucial, to make these solutions sustainable.
that makes sense. So for all our listeners out there who are deep in their UPSC prep, how does all this relate to the actual exam? I mean, how could this show up in questions?
Oh, this is a goldmine for UPSC questions. In prelims, you might see questions about the statistics on digital access.
Okay, so that jumped from 36 to 84%.
Right. Or questions about government schemes related to digital education, like the PM EV program, for example. Definitely need to know that one inside and out.
Got it.
Or even questions about the challenges faced by rural communities when it comes to this stuff.
Okay, good to know. What about mains? How could this topic come up there?
Oh, mains. Think about essays on the impact of technology on education. Strategies for bridging the digital divide. How do we actually make sure everyone benefits? Arguments for inclusive development. You'll need to really understand initiatives like the National Digital Education Architecture, NDIR.
And dear, okay.
That's about creating a unified digital infrastructure for education. important stuff.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
And, it's one thing to know the basics, but the UPSC wants to see that you can think critically about these issues.
Right. Apply that knowledge.
Exactly. So don't just memorize facts. Think about the connections. How does all this relate to government policies? How does it fit in with sustainable development goals?
Interesting. This is starting to feel less like just tech and more like a much bigger picture.
Oh, it definitely is. And the UPSC knows that.
Okay, wow. This is a lot to take in, but super relevant. We've only just scratched the surface, though. We'll be diving deeper into all of this in part 2, so make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss it.
It's easy to get excited about new technology, right? But we also have to be realistic.
Yeah,
Just because there are more smartphones out there doesn't mean all the problems in education are just going to magically disappear.
that's true.
Mm.
What are some of the things we need to be careful about as digital learning expands in rural India? Like, what could go wrong?
Well, if we don't pay attention to the inequalities that already exist, technology could actually make things worse.
How so?
Think about the digital gender gap, for example. In many rural areas, boys are more likely to have their own smartphones than girls.
Oh, I see what you mean. So we could end up widening the gap instead of closing it if we're not careful.
Exactly. Technology is just a tool. The important thing is how we use it. It's about the policies we put in place, the awareness we create, the training we provide. All of that determines whether digital education actually helps or hurts.
That makes a lot of sense.
So,
So beyond just providing devices and internet access, what needs to happen for digital learning to be truly effective in rural India?
one big issue is the content itself. A lot of the high-quality educational material is still mainly in English. And that's a huge barrier for students who don't speak English as a first language.
Right. It's like we're building this amazing highway to knowledge, but then putting up a toll booth in a language a lot of people can't afford.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. So how do we break down that language barrier? Is it just a matter of translating everything, or is it more complicated than that?
Yeah, is translation enough?
Translation is part of it, for sure.
Yeah.
And AI tools are getting better at that all the time. But we also need to create original, high-quality content in those regional languages, content that's engaging and interactive and really speaks to those rural learners.
The Hindu article also mentions something about making sure the content is relevant to rural students.
Absolutely. A lot of educational resources seem to be designed with an urban or even a Western perspective. But a student in a rural village might not relate to a textbook example about traffic jams in a big city. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. They need content that reflects their own lives and experiences.
Exactly. So it's not just about digitizing existing materials. It's about creating a whole new ecosystem of digital learning that's specifically designed for rural India.
It sounds like there's a huge opportunity here to really rethink what education can look like in the 21st century.
Exactly. We can use technology to personalize learning, to make it more engaging and more accessible to everyone no matter where they come from or where they live. Imagine classrooms where every student has a personalized learning path, where AI tutors can give them real-time feedback and support, where digital tools can help bridge those language barriers and make learning more inclusive.
That's a pretty amazing vision. But I'm also thinking about everyone out there who's studying for the UMSC. How can they demonstrate that they really understand these issues in the exam?
Well, first of all, don't just try to memorize a bunch of facts and figures. The UPSC wants to see that you can think critically, analyze information, connect the dots. So when you're studying digital education, don't just focus on the tech. Think about how it connects to government policies, to sustainable development goals, to the broader social and economic impacts.
So it's about understanding the why behind the what.
Exactly. And when you're writing, your answers be specific. Use examples from the Hindu article, from other reliable sources, from government reports. Show the examiners that you've done your research and you can apply what you've learned to real-world situations.
That's great advice. It's
You're-
all about showing that you can think like a policymaker. Someone who can weigh the pros and cons, understand the complexities, come up with solutions that are both innovative and equitable. But hey, let's test our listeners a little bit right now. Do you have any quick-fire questions based on what we've covered so far?
Let's see how well everyone's been paying attention.
All right, everyone, get ready. First question, according to that ASR data we keep talking about, what was the percentage increase in smartphone ownership in rural areas between 2018 and 2024? No cheating.
We're looking for a 48% increase. If you got that, you're on a roll.
Okay. Next one, what's one of the biggest challenges when it comes to digital literacy that's holding back the use of technology in rural education?
Lots of good answers here. But the one I was thinking of is the lack of training for teachers. If teachers don't have the skills to use digital tools effectively, it's going to be tough to integrate them into the classroom.
Absolutely. All right, last one. What's one potential solution from the Hindu article that could really help bridge the digital divide in education?
I'd say those digital learning hubs have the potential to be a game changer. Imagine them as vibrant knowledge centers where students can get extra support, learn new skills, really explore the world of digital learning.
Fantastic. If you got all those right, give yourself a pat on the back. And for everyone listening, go back to the Hindu article, reread your notes, make sure you really understand these concepts.
And remember, if you have any questions or you want to dig deeper into any of this stuff, just drop a comment below. We love hearing from you.
We do. Okay, we've covered a lot of ground today, but there's still so much more to explore. In part 3, we'll be talking about the ethical side of all this. And we'll also talk about what you can do to make a difference in this area. So make sure you stick around. All right, welcome back. So we've talked about all the possibilities and the problems with digital education in rural India and how all this ties into your UPSC prep.
Right.
Now, before we wrap things up, there's one more thing we need to consider, the big picture, the long-term vision.
Yeah, it's not enough to just focus on the immediate challenges.
Right.
We need to be thinking 10, 20 years down the line, thinking about the kind of future we're building for these rural students.
Okay, so what does success actually look like? I mean, in the long run, for digital education in rural India, what are the key ingredients?
Well, for me, it all boils down to inclusivity.
Inclusivity, okay.
Every child, no matter their background, their gender, where they live, should have a chance to benefit from all this technology.
So it's not just about access then. It's about using technology in a way that actually makes things fair.
Exactly. We don't want to widen the gap. We want to close it. Imagine, like, a future where digital tools are just a natural part of every rural classroom,
Yeah.
Teachers using technology in creative ways, and students who are excited about learning, who feel connected to the rest of the world.
That sounds amazing, honestly. A whole new world of possibilities, right?
But who knows? Maybe some of our listeners right now will be the ones making that happen.
I love that.
Mm.
Maybe you'll be designing the next big ed tech solution or writing the policies that ensure everyone has access to these resources.
Yeah, or maybe leading a community initiative that empowers a whole new generation of learners.
There are so many ways to make a difference.
Exactly. And that's what makes this topic so exciting, so relevant for your UPSC journey.
It's not just theory. It's real life.
It's about understanding what could be, not just what is.
Exactly. And for everyone out there who's working hard on their UPSC prep, remember this is about more than just an exam. These are real challenges, real opportunities that are shaping the future of India.
Absolutely.
By understanding these issues, you're not just prepping for the UPSC, you're actually prepping to go out there and make a real difference in the world.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
All right, so I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive. We've explored a lot of complex issues, but hopefully you're all walking away with a better understanding of what digital education means for rural India. The challenges, yeah, but the incredible opportunities too.
For sure.
And a huge thank you to the Hindu for that fantastic article that got this whole conversation started.
Yeah, thanks to them.
Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of our future deep dives.
We'll be back soon with another important topic that's bound to be on the UPSC radar.
Until then, happy studying, good luck on your exams, and we'll see you in the next one.